I'm Dr. Stephan Harrison. I'm at Exeter University. I'm a climate scientist who works on past climate change, which helps us understand future and present climate change. A lot of the work I do at Exeter University is around helping businesses and governments understand the risks of climate change and how climate change is going to affect them. But my sort of scientific work is based on climate change over the last 10 or 20,000 years and environmental changes associated with that. And actually, Scilly Isles have had an amazing history over the last 20,000 years. Sea levels, for instance, have risen by about 120 metres. And 20,000 years ago, when the ice sheets were at their maximum extent, the northern side of the islands were covered by ice. And as the ice melted, then sea levels rose to the levels that we see today. The global issue is that by the end of the century, almost whatever we do, we're going to have a rise in temperature of around 2 degrees Celsius or so. It may be more, it may be 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. And that's bound to have an enormous impact on sea levels. It'll affect the West Antarctic ice sheet, it'll affect the Greenland ice sheet, it will warm up the oceans, which will then expand anyway by thermal expansion. So we're probably going to see certainly one, and probably 2, and maybe even more meters of sea level rise by the end of the century. And with a 1 or 2 meter rise in sea level, then places like the Scilly Isles are enormously vulnerable to storm surges and to sea level rise of that sort of magnitude. So island groups like the Scillies and elsewhere around the world are thinking very carefully about the implications of climate change over this century. Well, what I'm hoping from the climate change talks in Copenhagen in December that we have not just political consensus that climate change is the problem. We've had that before anyway, but we need to go further, I think, this time. We need to have binding targets. It's the time for talking and the time for saying climate change is a major problem and we must do something about it is over. We need binding targets which will commit our economies to doing something about climate change and enabling us to adapt and mitigate the major effects.